What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the Two Game Podcast. For December, our Patreon supporters voted for a random game review. Then I put up several games up for a vote, and they chose Resident Evil 4 Remake, which had been on my playlist, my backlog for several months. I've been wanting to play it, but just never got around to it. I was stuck playing Final Fantasy VII and then some other games, so it just got put on the back burner. So going into this review, let me just go ahead and throw out just some disclaimers to y'all, okay? One, I have never played the OG original Resident Evil 4 game. Never played it. I started it on the Switch, played maybe about 10 minutes of it, and then stopped it. I have played Resident Evil 2 Remake, 3 Remake, and then now this one, and then Biohazard, and then Village. Those are about the extent of my Resident Evil game playthroughs. Really love the Resident Evil games that I have played through. Loved Resident Evil 2. 3 was okay for what it was. It was very short, and it like I said, it was fun for what it was. But it was nice to finally just sit down and focus on Resident Evil 4 Remake. And I gotta say, very excited to talk about this game. So I'm gonna run y'all through the story, the graphics, some miscellaneous things, and then at the back end of the review, I will touch on all the gameplay goodies that this game gave us. So story-wise, and again, coming from some of the other remakes and then Biohazard and Village, I really loved Biohazard. That's probably my favorite Resident Evil game from beginning to end. 2 Remake is right behind that, and then Village is probably behind that. But Resident Evil 4 Remake, the thing that I loved about this game, probably more so than anything else, the pacing. The pacing really helped the story, and it just pushed that story forward from moment to moment, and it felt like you were constantly on the move, and it was just a fast-paced game. And obviously the gameplay is going to have a lot of effect on that as well, but the story just never seemed like it ever took a moment to breathe. And on one hand, I can see the argument that that is a little bit of an issue, because while we do get a lot of Leon and his character, obviously because he's the main protagonist, he basically take his shirt off and give it to you. Scratch his back, he'll scratch your back kind of guy, and just a really relatable character in that sense. But then once you get away from him and his character, the story doesn't take enough time to really dive into some of the other characters. Now, from the people that I've talked to about the OG game, they actually kind of expand on some of these side characters a little bit more in this game. So I'm kind of pleasantly happy about that. Which is kind of crazy because they didn't spend a whole lot of time in this game, but to have some background on Leon's character and, where he was between Resident Evil 2 to Resident Evil 4 was, I think, a nice little choice. And they also give you kind of like a little bit of a recap portion at the very beginning of the game. So that was also nice. Little refresher on what had come before it. But I basically loved all the characters in this game. Luis, probably my favorite out of the side characters. Ada was just Ada throughout this entire game. Savage. So, I mean, there's not really much to say about her. Ashley was probably the weakest character out of the bunch. She was just really bland. They didn't really develop that character whatsoever. She does have a couple of moments here or there where she has like some self-doubt, where she would rather Leon just move on without her because she's just kind of slowing him down. And those moments are great. When the game takes its time to slow down for that brief second, those scenes are really, really great. And the chemistry between Ashley and Leon is actually pretty good in this game. But truth be told, a bulk of the story was told around the Plaga and the village and kind of the bosses and whatnot. And I'm not mad at that whatsoever. I think they were able to build the lore of Resident Evil a lot more in this game. Now, I could be wrong, but it feels like the lore was just a little bit better in this game, more so than some of the other games. I'm not typically a guy that reads, every single note, every single file. I usually just tap it and then I just skip it all, and I don't even freaking read it, right? Because ain't nobody got time for that, okay? I'm here to play games, not read books. So this was the first time that I don't know if it was because I was doing a full-fledged review for this game, or if it's just because that world Resident Evil itself just brought me in and wouldn't let me go. But I found myself reading every single note file, and I found myself becoming really invested in the backstory of all of these characters and the villains. So I ended up reading everything. And it just added to the gameplay experience for me overall. And I think more so this game than some of the other games, it's not as obscure with what you're reading. I feel like it's more accessible for the masses rather than some of the other games where the notes and the files, it's like, okay, I gotta decipher what the hell this thing just told me. But overall, I really enjoyed the files and the notes in this game for sure. It added some more depth to the game. Now, moving on to the graphics, this game looks absolutely fantastic. This is the best looking Resident Evil game to me so far. And I mean, that's not to say that the other games look bad. Obviously, all these games look very similar, and I really love that about this series so far is you can play them, and there's really no downgrade in quality between these games. They just kind of get a little bit better with each entry. Like that Resident Evil engine just absolutely, it looks absolutely fantastic. I did have one issue with frame rate drops against Del Lago, who was the lake monster fight that you have, which was a really cool fight though. Man, I don't want to jump into gameplay, but that was, I'll mention bosses for here for just a second. I think they're able to do a lot of different things with the bosses in this game, and all of them are different. And that's what I love about this game so much. It's not the same boss fight every single time. They have this one where you are basically trying to harpoon the Del Lago monster the entire time, and to me that was great. That was fun. It was a change of pace. Really enjoyed that. No complaints with the graphics or performance for this game. Now I'll jump into some of the miscellaneous things with the game, and then we'll end it on the gameplay. The UI was great. Easy to find your quest, your inventory, your maps. I liked how it was all laid out. Me being so OCD, I need it all laid out in a uniformed way. Horizon Forbidden West, I've spoken many times ad nauseum about that game and its UI, and that I love how it's broken down into several menus like that, just to kind of keep it all organized. But then you have some other games that I'm just like, ooh, this UI kind of sucks. It's difficult, kind of tedious to get through some of these menus. This game is not like that. It's really just 4 tabs and that's it. And I really enjoyed that they simplified the UI here to make it easy to just find everything. Now, there's one thing, and I'm going to bring up Horizon Forbidden West one more time here. One thing that is kind of an issue when you get into games in general, but games like this, you have to collect everything. There's so many collectibles. Horizon Forbidden West had a disgusting amount of collectibles. Okay, it felt like you were just going from point A to point B the entire time collecting shit. This one is great that there's not that overabundance of things to collect, and it's really just one thing that you're here to collect, and that is the clockwork bobblehead guys. And I want to say I found like 11, and that's not looking at any strategy guides, walkthroughs, anything like that. I just found 11 on my own, not really combing through everything. So I think the collectible system here is great. They simplified it and made it just one thing, and I really appreciate that. And then on top of the collectibles, we have a lot of the valuables where you can like inlay certain gemstones to sell them for more money. Really enjoy that aspect of the game because it was great to see the combination that you could put into the to the valuables and see how much that would multiply that item and how much you would get more money for it. And then the last thing that I want to talk about with miscellaneous, I guess you might be able to throw this into gameplay, but the level design here is so damn good. I can't stress to you how much I loved the level design here. I think the back half of the game is better designed in terms of like levels. Really, just the entire back half of the game is better in general, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But there were lots of times where I just thought about Dark Souls. And I know I'm that guy. I'm always going to bring up Dark Souls or a From Software game on the 2 Game podcast or even my reviews. But there were lots of times where it reminded me of those games because everything kind of led back to the beginning of the level where you would open up like little shortcuts, and it was so good. I love it when games can do that and they tie it up in a nice little bow and everything kind of feeds back to the beginning. And to me, this really adds to the horror aspects of the game for sure. Lots of corners with the level design. Never know who's going to be around the corner. Now, granted, I wish they would have leaned more into that, because with Dark Souls, you always have that chance of being ambushed. You go down there to get that little shiny item, and then you're being gangbanged by a bunch of and this game never really did that. There's like a couple of times, I want to say like 2 times that I remember, where I walked into a door and there was a guy in there and he immediately hit me. And I wish that would have been in the game a lot more. Not to the point where it felt like it was like doing it repetitively and I could catch on to it, but just do it a little bit more than what we got, because I think that would have made this game even scarier than what it was. And lastly, it's time to jump into the gameplay, which is why you come to play these games, right? So Resident Evil 4 arguably is every Resident Evil fan's favorite game. Like, you talk to any of them, a lot of them might mention Resident Evil 2, but a lot of people refer to Resident Evil 4 as the GOAT in the Resident Evil series. And I can see why, guys. I can see why. This game is fun as shit. I'm not typically a huge shooter fan. I loved more of the survival horror aspects to the other games, like Resident Evil 2. Loved the horror, or even Biohazard, which leaned more into the horror aspects of the series rather than it being more action based. And I really enjoyed that game, especially from that horror standpoint. Scary as shit. One of my favorite gaming experiences ever. And this game is able to blend both of those worlds seamlessly, I think. The whole game wasn't like running and gunning. They paced it very, very well with the big action sequences. There were some times where it just felt like, okay, this is a straight up, they turned this into an action game all of a sudden. And it's not like that throughout the entire game. Obviously, you're going to be killing folks from level to level, but every once in a while, they throw out these little hordes of enemies where you're just having to kind of just shoot your way out of things. And I really loved the pacing of that throughout this game. Now, a second ago, I mentioned the back half of the game being a lot better and a lot scarier. And the back half of the game is really where this game excels for me. Like, don't get me wrong. I enjoyed the first half of the game where you're in the village and you're going from part to part. And like, all that is great. Loved it. But to me, it didn't really feel Resident Evil until I got to like the midway point of the game. Like chapters like 11 through 14, easily my favorite part of the entire game, where you go through the mines, the clock tower, the island, and the cargo depot. Like, that was legitimately my favorite aspect of the entire game, more so because it leaned into the horror side of the series rather than the action. But granted, there's still a lot of action to be had in those sections. But to me, that was where the game really shined. I mean, they had all these different variety of enemies, especially the regenerators, which were pretty damn cool, actually, but scary as shit. Because when you first meet them and you're like, okay, he just regenerated. How do I kill this damn thing? And you end up finding through a note that you have to go get a certain scope and then you can kill him that way. The regenerators were freaking awesome. And again, it added to the horror, and that was in the middle of that section that I was talking about between 11 and 14 where they show up. And I loved that little wrinkle that they added to the gameplay there, where you had to go get that certain scope in order to kill them. And then they added even another wrinkle to the game when you would kill them and then they would regenerate again. And then you would have to shoot them in the head a couple of times. So like the unpredictability of the game, I'm telling you, is worth points for me, because I love it when a game is so unpredictable. I don't know where it's going. And the fact that a horror game is unpredictable is even more, because, a lot of the times with being a fan of that specific genre in movies, you kind of pick up on all the cliches, right? But this game was able to play with your expectations and be unpredictable, and I really love that about this game. But like I was saying, the regenerators, that to me feels Resident Evil. Like when I think about the series, I think about regenerators. I think about the rabid dogs. I think about the bugs in this game. That's what I think about when I think about Resident Evil. And you got the zombies, obviously. It reminded me a lot of the movie The Crazies with how the village people were behaving. That's exactly what I thought about when I played this game, and I'm not mad at it because The Crazies was a damn good movie. And then going back to the aspect of the bosses, I think all the bosses were great. All the bosses were great. I don't think any of them were just flat out bad. Most of them were memorable and even great fights. And like the fight between Major Krauser, which was you have to fight him twice. The first one is pretty simple. It's basically a parry and attack fight. That one you could say not so much, but his second fight was so good because it felt very. If you've ever seen the movie Universal Soldier, that's what it reminded me of. Okay, especially at the end when there's booby traps and he's coming at you like a full-fledged soldier in like Vietnam. That's what it reminded me of. That fight was really, really cool. Kind of annoying because he's shooting at you and then you're running and then you step into a trap. That kind of pissed me off, not gonna lie, but it was still really great level design and boss design for sure. But the final boss, Sadler, was one of my favorites for sure. Just all across the board, no complaints with the bosses, really. So, guys, overall, I absolutely freaking love this game. This is my favorite Resident Evil game now, without a doubt. I think they were able to blend the action and the horror seamlessly, and from the moment it started to the moment it ended, and especially like I said, right around chapter 10, chapter 11, and until the end of the game, I was on the edge of my seat, and there were several moments where I got freaking scared. Not gonna lie, like there were several jump scares that were very effective throughout the game, and to me, the back half of the game is where it really, really shines and excels with all the horror aspects and even the action as well. But the game overall, to me, is damn near perfect, honestly. I think this was about as close of a perfect Resident Evil game that you can get. Now, granted, I never played the original games or even the original Resident Evil 4, so I can't really comment on that. I'm only going to comment on the game that I actually played, and this was pretty damn good. I'm going to end up giving this like a 9.5 out of 10. This was a pretty damn great experience overall. I think if I had to make just a couple complaints, it was the underdeveloped side characters that we didn't really get to know a whole lot of. I'm looking at you, Ashley. For as much time as we spent with her, I wish we would have got to know her character a little bit more. We got to know Luis a lot more than I thought we would have when we first got introduced. But yeah, some of the characters would probably be my one thing that would knock the game for. And then, but yeah, I think the character development of some of these characters probably the only knock I would say about this game. So like a 9.5 out of 10, but that being my only complaint for the game. Pretty damn great. Okay, guys, I am 100% going to play this game again in the near future, and I'm going to try to 100% get that platinum trophy. Probably won't, but gotta have high hopes, okay? Gotta have high hopes. But guys, let me know down in the comments below of what you thought about Resident Evil 4 Remake. Let me know what you loved about it, what you hated about it, how is it different than the OG game, and which one do you like more? And then in the description below, we have links to all of our social media accounts. We would greatly appreciate it if you went there, like, subscribe, follow, whatever. And there's even a link to our Patreon, patreon.com/2game. We would greatly appreciate it if you went there and supported us. If you would like to be a part of our Patreon, you can go there and you can vote on things like this every single month. And we really do try to cater our content to what our Patreon supporters really want every single month. But other than that, I really appreciate y'all joining me for this review, and I will catch y'all next time on another episode. Laters.